This episode of Drawn to It podcast is brought to you by Cat Animation Online Art School, offering their students high-quality mentoring by experienced, caring professionals in animation, story design, and much more at very affordable prices. Beginning and advanced classes and mentoring slots for the spring semester of 2021 are forming now. Don't miss the opportunity to learn and grow from Disney-trained animators and artists currently working in the animation industry. Visit www.cat-animation.com for details about their unique school, their distinguished faculty, and how to apply for future classes or mentoring. They look forward to working with you in the near future. Happy Monday. Yeah, it's Monday, and we have another inspirational podcast to help you get through it while you're working, doing whatever you do while you listen. We have part 2 with Brian Lemay. He talks about the second half of his career, very inspirational, and it's all coming up right here on Drawn to It podcast.
Drawn to it, sketching doodles in your textbooks. In the corners, making animation flip books. Writing stories, then turn them into comic shocks. Get out the clay, I'm a stomp Garth Brooks. It doesn't matter how you create, cause you're drawn to it, drawn to it.
We left off with you talking about your role in the Ryan film.
Right.
And that was...
Actually, I did want to back up a little bit because there's a bunch of stuff at Sheridan that I completely forgot about. So we can go back and talk a little bit about that time period.
Take it away. The memory card's empty.
Okay. Let's see if we can eat it up.
Yes.
So back when I was just going backwards in time to Sheridan again, like I just sort of, flipped through and talked about the actual teaching at Sheridan. Mm-hmm. But during that time period, there was so much stuff going on that was outside of Sheridan as well, because I was still, I just left the industry. I was still in touch with a lot of people. And so I was getting a lot of people who were contacting me and saying, hey, can you work on this? Can you work on that? And I was trying to accommodate as many people as I possibly could. Obviously, I couldn't go in. I had to work from home. So I was freelancing, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But one of the really cool things that happened very, very quickly within the first 3 years is one of my students, there was a cluster of students actually in the very first year that I really enjoyed them. They were very attentive students. They were really gung-ho. It was that class that I gave the Tim Hortons or the Harveys thing to. Right. And endeared a lot of people, but also turned off a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So there was a cluster of them who were really into it. And one of the fellows, his name was Greg Hyland. He had been doing a little mini comic. And for those of you who don't know what a mini comic is, it's basically an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper folded in half, and you draw it in comic form. And some people will add extra pages, fold some more and add them in and make it larger. But during the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, this was something that a lot of people did. And they would go into their local comic book store and they would sell them or put them on consignment with the comic book store. Mm-hmm. And then they would hopefully try and sell them, and the kid would make money. And a lot of it was just goofy stuff. And that's what Greg had. He had this character called Lethargic Lad, mm-hmm. who basically was the opposite of anything active. Right. He basically just stood around and things happened around him. His only way of communicating, he would say, and that was it. Mm. And so he showed me these little mini comics that he had done. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And he just kept pumping them out. And I was really intrigued by the fact that he was so into it. He was one of these students who wanted to get into comic books and loved comic books. And I love comic books as well. But he just, obviously he's a student. And so, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. So I tried to encourage him as much as I possibly could. So I said to him, you should expand this out a little bit more. You should add more pages, because it was just one folded sheet of paper. So I said, listen, I'll contribute a character that I had created back when I was working on Ewoks and Droids called the Zit. And the Zit was a character that came out of a very interesting not a confrontation, but an interaction with a person in the layout department at Nelvana, who was he was standing at the photocopy machine, photocopying layouts and backgrounds and whatnot. And of course, back then it was no computer. It was just you photocopy and you cut and paste and you tape it up, or not cut and paste, but you tape it by repegging it. And so some people would have, a huge stack of drawings to photocopy, and you'd be sitting waiting for this person to do whatever they're going to do. So I was waiting there, waiting, and I'm just sort of, you're standing there looking around and chit-chatting with other people who were standing in line. And I was looking at him, and I noticed right on the edge of his ear right here, he had what looked like a whitehead, like a pimple whitehead, but it was really pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
I'm staring at it, and I'm going, wow, that's a pretty big zit. So I said to him, I said, is that a zit on your ear? And he freaked out. He just went, ah! And grabbed all his papers and ran away.
Oh, wow.
And so out of that, this inspiration came to me of this character who has a zit on his ear, and everybody makes fun of him, calling him Zithead. Mm-hmm. And slowly the zit grows and grows, and it eventually envelops his entire head until he's just one zit.
Yeah.
And so he confronts them. They're laughing at him, calling him Zithead, and he squeezes his head and shoots pus out at them. And
I remember the images for it.
So that was the inspiration for the Zit. So then I took that, and during the Ewoks and Droids, I sort of played around with turning it into a comic book daily page thing that I would pin up, using various people in the layout department as characters in it. So when Greg was doing this mini comic, I said, hey, I got this character. I've never done anything with him really. I'll contribute some pages and some artwork to it. So we started collaborating. I would do a page and he would do his stuff. And then another student was interested in doing something. So he came in and did something. And another two students came in and they decided they wanted to add some stuff. So pretty soon it got to the point where it was pretty much a full-blown 22-page comic book. 8.5 by 11, folded over in half, but stapled together. And so we started selling it to the students in the class and the students in the program, and we eventually took it to the bookstore and sold it through the bookstore. And then we took it to the various comic book shops, and we were in comic book shops all across the GTA area.
Wow.
And then it just started gaining this following. And then we go to the comic book conventions, and the comic conventions were fun. I mean, most people who are into animation have been to a comic book convention as well. So we would go into the artist alley, and we would have a table where we'd sit there, sell the books, and sign them. So we were in the small press, is what it was called, the small press area. And sometimes, you'd be doing absolutely nothing all day. Nobody would come near you. It's like you were a pariah. And other days, you'd have a good crowd of people and whatnot.
Now, was this during the time period when Image Comics was starting and comic books were super cool?
Not quite. Okay. This would have been in 1990, right around 1990, because at the end, 1980 or 88 was when he started. 89, 90 was his third year. So we had sort of made this agreement with all the other people who were working on it. There was 5 of us altogether. That if we could make it a good go of it. And make the mini comic actually popular and whatnot. And we got up to 50 issues is what we ended up doing.
Wow.
We decided we're going to turn this over and we're going to turn it into a real comic. So we went to a printer. We found a good price for the comic book, and we did a full-blown actual comic book, black and white with color cover. And we printed up about 10,000 copies. And our initial sales right off the bat to comic book distributors was 4,000.
Wow,
right
that's great.
And then that was it for that first issue. So then we realized, holy cow, we overprinted. We better really knock this back quite a bit. But we were figuring, okay, maybe sales will pick up and, we'll be okay. So on issue number 2, we did 5,000, but we only ended up getting 3,000 copies sold out of that one. So then issue number 3 came, and we were on a bi-monthly basis at this point. Every 2 months we put out a book. So by issue number 3, we thought, okay, we better pull back a little bit just in case. So we went down to 4,000, and we only sold 3,000 at that point. So we were starting to level out, and we were hoping that it would start to gain, but it never really did. So we ended up leveling out our print run at about 3,000, and we chugged away on a bi-monthly basis doing the comic book shops and distributing. At that time, there were probably about 20 distributors across North America. So Diamond and I can't remember, Capital were the two big ones. And then there were smaller ones, mom and pop ones that would be around. And so the comic book companies would basically send their comics to the distributors, and they would order them a certain number, and then they would distribute to their local comic book shops. So we were doing pretty well. We were basically breaking even. Let's put it that way. We never paid ourselves. It was just purely for the fun of it, right?
Well, breaking even's like way better than most independent comic book artists.
Yeah,
so
for sure. So we chugged along, and we got up to issue number 11, and we were doing the circuit, running around to the comic book conventions and distribution conventions. And what ended up happening was the two larger, Diamond and Capital, started buying up all the mom and pop ones and consolidating them into just the two distributors. And then they started, not liking the small press stuff as much.
Right.
So our sales really started to drop dramatically at that point. And then that's when Image actually started their rise. And there were quite a few conventions. Mostly the Chicago Comic-Con was our fun one, where we would go, and Greg would often have a bullhorn, and he would go and heckle the Image people. And and we would do all sorts
nothing
of
like trying to pick a fight with Goliath.
Yeah. Well, it was goofiness, because they were the new kids on the block, and they were doing trendy stuff that looking back in hindsight, most of the books are pretty much worthless, that they had put out during that time period. But everybody was buying up. Like, this was when people were speculating. Trading cards, hockey cards and baseball cards, had shot through the roof as far as, how much they were worth. And pretty soon it came to the point where any card was worth something. It's like Magic these days, or, the Gathering and stuff like various cards like that. People go nuts on them and speculate and think this is going to be worth millions of dollars when I'm older. Yeah. And so people would be buying, 10. And then the comic book companies, the big DC and Image and Marvel, were feeding into that by doing their multiple run, different covers and stuff like that. So what was fun about the Lethargic thing is we were a parody magazine for comic, where we were making fun of DC and Marvel and Image. So anytime the trade magazines would come out with what the next hot cover was going to be, like X-Men #1 with a 4 fold-out cover, they would often show what that was going to be 2 or 3 months in advance. And so we would immediately do our parody version of it and publish our comic book a month before their comic book actually came out. So we would show up to comic book conventions going, hey, look at our big 4 cover fold-out cover parody of X-Men #1, but it hasn't come out yet. Funny. So we would always beat them to the punch whenever we were doing parodies.
And did the comic book ever get close to being picked up for licensing for television deal?
No. Well, we got so heady and thinking that we could make something go of this, because we thought, okay, people are writing us, and we're popular at the conventions, and the sales were not too bad. We thought, let's go for it. So we started doing like a monthly comic strip for newspapers, pitched it to the syndicates, and we were doing television series of Lethargic Lad and His Amazing Friends. I have a series Bible for it that we did, and model sheets and everything.
Wow.
We pitched like crazy, and nobody would touch it. And part of this was because Image was just driving everything, and they were doing goofy stuff, and everybody was buying their stuff, and things got crazy at that point. And then the bottom fell out of the entire comic book market.
Yeah.
and everybody's standing there holding on to their X-Men #1 variant covers, thinking that they were going to be worth $100, and they're worth nothing. And
Yeah.
comic book stores had piles of them that they had ordered, and they couldn't give them away.
Yeah.
Nobody would take them. And so, the bottom fell out. We got actually picked up by another small press comic book company called Alpha Comics, and they then carried us from issue number 12, and then we renamed the comic from Lethargic Comics Weekly, like weekly as in not strong.
Mm-hmm.
We then flipped it over to just Lethargic Comics, and we did 14 issues of that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it rode on again. Our sales did go up once we switched to Alpha, because suddenly we were under a different banner, and it was a real publisher
Mm-hmm.
that had been carrying other artists as well. So our numbers did go up. But then, the band, one guy got married to a Yoko girl, and she broke up the band.
Oh, no.
No. Using it it's a parody.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't anything like that. It was just the band just decided, we're not making a go of this. We got other stuff. A lot of the guys had flown off and gone to Ireland and were working on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or here, there, and everywhere. And it was just difficult. The logistics of getting everybody to do their pages, within a 2-month period was difficult. So the band broke up, and we stopped doing it. And
Yeah.
but that was fun.
Was it more satisfying working on a comic book or working within an animated production?
Well, the comic book, you're by yourself, and you're only with the people that we were with. But once Alpha picked us up, Greg left and moved to Maine to work with them. They were based out of Maine, so I didn't have Greg to chum around with. So I was basically by myself, and everybody else was by themselves. And so there's not the camaraderie type thing that you would have in a studio. I mean, now with COVID, nobody's together, but back then everybody was together. So at that point, it wasn't that it was any better. It was just different. And it was an outlet, an artistic outlet during the time that I was actually teaching as well. So the reason I actually took it on was partially because I wanted to help Greg and the other guys get their portfolios going and hopefully, get them into the industry somehow. Never with aspirations for myself to get anything, because I was teaching. And that was my primary gig, was teaching. And so, the dog's barking at someone out there.
It's okay.
So we would plug away at it just for the fun of it. And I wouldn't say it was any better or any worse than the only good thing that actually came out of it was I did get a job with Dark Horse Comics. One of the editors loved our comic and asked me to do a Tex Avery series of comics.
Wow.
So there was a
very cool.
Squirrel and Droopy and The Wolf in Red were the 3 comic books.
Yeah.
And so I had one story in each of them, sometimes 2 stories in each of them. But I was writer, artist, inker. I didn't do the coloring, but I was responsible for writing and illustrating.
Yeah.
So that was a little fun to get that.
Yeah, that would be very fun. Did you find it intimidating to try to capture that Tex Avery soul, like that style?
No, I was so into that stuff.
Yeah, good.
I had my Betamax and I was videotaping them, and then eventually they came out on Laserdisc, and so I had his complete collection. And then I had bought the various books that had been published about him. So I've always been a Tex Avery fan and loved the stuff that he did. So I just sort of dove into it. I took the actual model sheets from the animated series that he did for MGM, and I used those in what I was doing for the comic. And some of the other people, cool. they modified it and made it a little bit more weird, wacky type thing. But I stuck right to the model sheets.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing that all the time now with everything. They're changing it and making it super cute and super graphic, and it makes me not want to work in animation anymore.
They're just trying to go with whatever is hot at the time.
Yeah.
But then after I picked up a few other things. A toy company approached me to design their plush toys that had a spin-off, which was a series of comic books. So we did 2 issues of each one. One was an action figure and one was a children's thing. That never got off the ground. They were supposed to do a television series as well, and again, they couldn't get the funding for it. Basic story.
Yeah. Yeah. Typical.
So that pulled up. So then those were, and I was just picking up freelance jobs here, there, and everywhere, more illustration stuff than anything else, simply because I wanted to show the students that, I wasn't just the guy who sat in class and talked a lot.
Yeah.
I could actually do this stuff. So I would bring in stuff that I was working on and show them. And I think that brought a little bit more relevance to me.
Yeah.
Because I found that as I was going through the years at Sheridan, like I worked there for 13 years, towards the end, like when things started to get weird with the students because of their empowerment and feeling that they were justified in arguing and fighting back. It got to the point where I needed to justify the fact that I was something more than just a teacher, because they would often look at you and go, well, when was the last time you worked in the industry? It was that type of stuff that they started.
That happens with all animation students everywhere, right around second year. There seems to be a blossoming of ego. Because maybe they were able to get something on model for a change, and all of a sudden they're God's gift. I was guilty of it too. I don't know what it is about that age or time period in your journey in the industry, but the ego just skyrockets. And you have nothing to back it up with.
It's a weird thing that takes place. So and it does happen quite a bit. But what can you do?
Well.
The thing I've found throughout my entire career is that the statement of, you're only as good as the last thing you've done, seems to ring true over and over and over again. I had mentioned before that, I was out of work for a period of time recently. I've just actually, just after our interview, I did pick up a job.
Yay.
So doing storyboarding. So I'm working on storyboards right now.
Well, actually, after our interview, something happened on my end too.
Oh, good.
Let me just put my mug up so I have a cut point, because I don't want it in this. But Bell optioned my show,
cool.
which is like a TV version of this podcast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for 7 episodes.
Cool.
Yeah. So that like just happened a few days ago.
You must be flying high right now.
Yeah, because I have another podcast called Producers Without a Clue, and now I'm an actual producer now. I'm on a show, so I got to get a clue real fast.
That's great! Congratulations!
Yeah, thanks. That's
cool.
But
right. So you're only as good as the last thing that you've done. It seems to ring true quite a bit. I mean, people are always challenging you. So back to the story of where I've been. So after Sheridan sort of went sour, I flipped over to Seneca and pitched the idea of the anti-Sheridan 2D, 3D hybrid program, which they bought. So I wrote the curriculum and coordinated that program for a couple of years. During that time period, I also I learned Maya. I went in during the break between end of Sheridan and beginning of Seneca. I took their summer program and learned Maya, which was educational. It was interesting. I really enjoyed the animation portion of it. I really disliked the rigging.
Yeah,
the rigging
me too.
I hated.
Yeah.
And, so I never really latched. I was, again, because I became a student, I understood what students will do, and I did it.
Yeah.
I was never against the instructors. I always valued the instructors entirely, and relied on them for giving me information. But I was guilty that when we phased out of modeling and into rigging, my mind just sort of went blank, and I continued to model, but I didn't rig. So eventually what ended up happening was, for the final thesis if you want to call it that. You had to produce a little piece of animation. So I got someone else to rig my character for me, and then I went through and animated the whole thing myself. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Well, I mean, rigging is a whole thing on its own, like a whole
yeah.
career.
Well, I
And
have total respect for anybody who's a TD.
yeah,
It's amazing what they do. Absolutely incredible.
unreal. Yeah.
Yeah. So took that program, then flipped into Seneca when they bought the program and ran it for a couple of years. Had a little altercation with the associate dean over something goofy, and she wanted me to do stuff above and beyond what I was actually there for, and I basically said no.
Yeah.
So then I stepped back as coordinator, just did the teaching thing, because the coordinating, it's a different level of stress and pain and suffering that my hat is off to anybody who's coordinating an animation program anywhere. Man, it's a lot of stress and you're getting it from both ends. You're getting it from management above and you're getting it from the students below.
Yeah.
Because as a coordinator, you're not just you have to be an instructor as well. But you're also there to answer for whatever the students are complaining about. And so they come to you, they complain about another instructor or whatever, and you've got to try and soothe their nerves and calm them down and placate them. But then you got management above, pounding at you for budgets and so I backed off. And I just went to teaching. So Seneca, I taught there for 13 years. And in the middle of that, around 2005, the coordinator of the Humber program, which is strictly 3D, approached me and asked me if I would be interested in teaching there as well. So I said, yeah. So then I was doing double duty, which was tricky, trying to, coordinate your schedule. Whichever school would give you your schedule first, you then turn around to the other school and say, okay, this is when I'm available. So it was always first come, first serve. And it worked out well over the time period that I was doing both of them at the same time for about, 10 years, I guess. I was overlapping.
Wow.
So at Seneca, I was teaching character design, layout, storyboarding, and animation. And then over at Humber, I was teaching character design and sculpting, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Where we actually, did three-dimensional sculpts to help the students understand that, when you're translating a 2D image that you've designed on paper into 3D in the computer, to have that 3D model that you've actually modeled with your hand gives you that nice next step. And some people got it. Some people got it really nicely, and other people were they were out to lunch with it with their hands. Yeah, but they could do it in the program. And during that time period, this is 2005, so it was still push and pull on your mesh that you had created for your character in 3D, and Mudbox hadn't come out yet. And so that was still a few years later. I can't remember what year that came out, but once that came out, everything changed as far as modeling goes. So we did the sculpting. Then I flipped into storyboarding. We did some layout as well, 2D design layout, which was then translated into 3D modeling design, which worked out really, really well for the students. We do floor plans, orthographic views, and then we go into actual layout, 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective. And having them, draw it on paper and then translate that into a 3D image by building the actual set.
Yeah, so I did that same thing with my students too, and it really helped them. It helped them understand scene composition. Because before that they were always drawing like super high horizon lines and just everything was just the opposite of cinematic appeal, right? So
well, the other thing too was purposefulness, like understanding what things you're designing into your set, what purpose are they going to serve at a later date, and understanding just simple stuff. Like it was incredible. We were talking about doors, just the size of a door, the dimensions of a door, and how a door actually works. Because people would be modeling in 3D, they'd be using the the boxes and whatnot, and cutting out the shapes and filling in but they wouldn't think of a door jamb, the
Right.
little strip of wood that stops the door from over, swinging.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't design that into their 3D sets. They would just have this open,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't even put a frame around the door. And thinking about, the trim and what the shape of it is and all that stuff. So
Hmm.
it did open up their eyes quite a bit.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I taught was animation posing, which was a lot of fun. Where we would design our characters in 2D, and then we would have everybody sit in the class in a circle, a big ring, and then each student would go up and go into a pose, some sort of dynamic pose of some sort.
Mhm.
And then we'd have to try and stress the line of action running through the character and push the pose further and try and make it as extreme as possible. So some people, they do their lame type of poses, and I say, no, stretch your arm out, get that line of action. Where's that line running through your body?
Yeah.
And how can you force that? And then that would then overlap into their animation, trying to look for those nice key silhouette poses to make their animation really snap really well.
Yeah.
So,
I find it takes a while to, even as a student for me, I had a hard time learning to push too far so I could pull back versus not pushing far enough,
yeah.
And because I remember, like, Harold used to yell at me all the time about that. He'd be like, push the pose. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it looks pretty cool, doesn't it? He's like, but once it clicks, then it becomes like everything is pushed to the 10th degree, and then you pull it back
Yeah.
as needed. And but yeah, there is something about learning that takes a while.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the process of doing that, I wrote another little mini book on dynamic posing. And just within the context of that, I would take a basic pose from the class that we did. I'd say, I would draw along with the students as well, but I'd take a lame pose that a student had done and then show them the process, similar to what we were talking about before about that you said I would go over your drawing.
Yeah.
And so I'd show them that process of taking the next step and the next step. And, in some cases you take a pose and you go 15 versions of it in order to get it to that proper pose where it looks nice and extreme. So it's not just a one step process. There's so many layers to it that you go through.
I find a lot of animators today, even though they've been in the game for a minute, right? They feel insecure about revealing the fact that sometimes they have to do 10 to 15 draw overs of their drawing to get a good drawing.
Yeah. But I don't think there's any shame in that.
I don't think so now. I used to. But now I'm okay with the idea that, I struggle with drawing. It's a process, and because I was talking to a character designer a couple nights ago. We're working on a project together, and we've decided to do screen capture as we work. And she was very standoffish. She's like, I don't know. I get nervous. People watching me draw, they're going to expect I have to draw the perfect line every time, and that's not how I work. And I'm like, you know what? That's not how I work either. And I showed a Photoshop. Yeah, I showed a Photoshop file where I had just layers of one horrible drawing after another until something appealing came of it, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's a growing process. I mean, every job has a growing process to it where you're getting in sync with what's going on. Like this project that I'm working on right now, storyboarding, it's a kids show. I can't reveal anything about it, but it's a kids show, and so they gave me the script, and so I'm going through the script and I'm blocking out where the scene cuts are going to be, and then you start in the process of drawing. And of course, I've never drawn the characters before. Well, I did one for the test before I got the job. But you start in storyboarding the characters, and you're just sort of plowing away. And I'm working very, very loose and rough, and not stick figure, but basic shapes and facial expressions and that type of stuff. And so I plowed my way through. I started it last Monday, not this Monday, but the previous, right after we did our first interview.
Yep.
Started on Monday, and by the end of the week, I was looking back at my early drawings that I did on Monday and going, "Oh, those are horrible drawings." So I'd have to go back over top of them and fix them up. But you sort of get your speed and used to the characters and
Yeah.
your proportions and everything. So yeah, it's rarely ever. I'm only going to talk for myself because we're talking. I can't just go in and take a design and go bam, I've got it right off the bat, first drawing.
Yeah.
It's such a struggle to get to the point where you're comfortable. But then it just becomes natural. You get used to it's the mechanics of moving your hand.
Yeah.
Right? You move your hand and your brain process of thinking it through. Part of it has to do with I've often told my students this is if you can develop this little trick skill of mentally visualizing what the image is going to look like to be able to see it in your head first.
Yeah.
To such a concrete level that I tell my students this, when I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper and I'm thinking about the character pose, I can see pose on the paper.
Yeah.
It's not a clear line. It's sort of fuzzy and nebulous, but I know where it is.
Yeah.
And then I can go in and I can sort of start to sketch it out.
So one thing that helped me with that, because that visualization became something I really strive for during my time with Disney in Kelowna. And one thing that really helped me was picking a very thick brush in the program and drawing the blotch pose, the silhouette, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
And the more I did that, the less intimidating the white page became. And the more I stopped worrying about the details and the line flow and just worried about the silhouette. And then everything came after,
Yeah.
And it was like this big revelation. And I got like part of my team, I got other artists doing the same thing. And we would meet at lunch and talk about, oh, can you believe that? As if we had just discovered it. Meanwhile, the technique's been around forever, you know, but we're like, oh my God.
It's revolutionary.
Yeah, revolutionary.
Yeah,
but it changed our workflow like overnight the day it clicked.
Yeah.
And there's a book called The Perfect Bait, audio book, and it's by a artist in Toronto, does a lot of concept art for movies and animated productions, a lot of creature artwork. And he talks about that in the book by starting with a cube and in your mind rotating it around without losing the image, right? And then work your way up to more complex shapes. And I thought when I first heard the audiobook, I'm like, oh my God, these people with that's whatever. But then I tried it. I'm like, oh, I owe that guy an apology.
It's a constant learning. Again, for me, it's a constant learning process. Like you never really stop learning something new. Every drawing you do is like a brand new experience where you're drawing something that you've never drawn before in a position that you've never drawn. I mean, there's similarities to a certain extent, but that's the cool thing about animation is that nothing is ever the same.
I know.
It's always
that's the
different.
best.
Yeah.
I had a question for you in terms of mentorship. When you think back on your mentors, the people you look up to, when you're drawing today and you achieve something in the drawing, does it click in your head, oh, I wonder if so-and-so would be impressed by that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's Jim McCauley.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah.
Jim, and there are so many people that I know there's so many people that revere him from Chardon. He was such an amazing artist that he could just draw anything in such an amazing way.
Yeah.
And whenever I draw, I'm always thinking, I hope Jim would like this.
Yes.
But Jim would always, when I was in college and he was my teacher, Jim had the standard line that I think he gave to everybody. He'd be going, you're just not getting it, are you? You'd show him a drawing and he'd go, you're not getting it.
Yeah. Well, that's
And
better than
they go
Milk
over it.
Cole's quote, which is you can't draw your ass or something. So a little
But
more
he
friendly.
would go over the drawing, and he would just show you what was so wrong about it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when I draw, those are the things that are going through my head. Is
Mhm.
the way Jim would draw it. And so yeah, he's the number one mentor for me. Hands-on mentor was Jim for sure.
It's funny how your mentors stay with you, like they're like living ghosts inside your brain
Yeah,
as you're
yeah,
working. Um,
yeah,
I don't think I've had a drawing where I haven't thought of either you or Harold or others who have been my mentor and been like, oh, because I'll remember certain conversations during a draw over, and you
yeah.
know I guess it's, you like to think that you're improving and doing people proper service to the time they put into you, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The other person that was a big influence on me professionally was Bob Jakes,
Mm.
um, who was in my class at Sheridan, and we worked together on rock and roll, and then we worked together on Atkinson's at Teddy Ruxpin. He was an animation poser, and the thing about Bob was he had such an amazing faculty with the line quality of
Hmm.
his art, and what what he did on Teddy Ruxpin was just truly amazing. Um, we would often, I would go in and do the Patrick thing that Patrick did to the people. I would go in late at night, and
Yeah.
I would go through his desk,
Hmm.
and I would pull out his drawings, and I would just look at them, and
Yeah.
I was just so amazed at how beautiful his work was. And one of the things that helped this was the pencil that he was using. At that time, Color Erase was the number one pencil. It's still
Hmm.
called the animation pencil.
Hmm.
There's non-photo blue. There's dark blue, and there's the red, scarlet red, with the erasers on the end. So the thing about those is that they are very wax-based leads,
Hmm.
like lead. They've got a lot of wax in them, so they go on fairly clean. He used a Prismacolor pencil crayon,
Hmm.
barrel Prismacolor, and I immediately switched over to a barrel Prismacolor, and
Yeah.
suddenly my drawings had a better flavor to them. They
Yeah.
didn't look so wire bent. They
Yep.
just had richness to them. And so ever since then, I've always now I'm using not barrel the barrel pencils. Now I'm using Faber Castells
Hmm.
are my go-to pencil.
Yeah.
246 is the number of Prussian blue.
Yeah.
That's what I use for all my stuff. Even right now, the storyboarding that I'm doing right now, I'm using pencil on paper and then scanning.
Really?
Yeah, we
Wow.
had the option on this production. They gave us the option of using Storyboard Pro or going with pencil. So
Hmm.
I'm going pencil and paper all the way.
Wow. Good for
So
you. That's awesome.
yeah,
Um, I've used Storyboard Pro before, and it just it I don't know. Doing it on paper can be so labor intensive.
it is.
Storyboard Pro has that immediate rush.
Yeah,
You hit play and you see your poses play out on the timeline. You're set. You're okay. I like that. Gonna keep going. On paper, it's a little more, but there is something to doing it on paper too. When you see them all in a row and you're like, yeah, you're putting it up on the wall. And yeah, look at that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The thing with the Storyboard Pro or anything digital is that it is basically you're working with pen.
Hmm.
It's the line goes down, and in some cases, they're using the vector line, which automatically locks you into, the thick and thin of whatever. I hate that.
Yeah.
Um, as soon as you draw a line, and all of a sudden you've got all these vector points that you can controllers to pull and twist, and I'm thinking, holy cow, no!
I know. I know.
Because again, my drawing is very, it's a lot of swirly,
Hmm.
loopy lines. I like doing loose, light stuff first. Like I'll put down a very light circle for the
Hmm.
cranial mass,
Yeah.
and then I build my form on top of that, and then do a cylinder for the body and then work out of that. So I like to draw very light, and that's something you can't really do in Storyboard Pro. It's I mean, you probably could, but I've never investigated enough to.
Yeah, you got to invest time into building a brush or buying one online. People do that now, sell brushes, but they are out there, and you can do it, but it can take work, and then sometimes you shut the program down. It doesn't save your brush, and you're back to trying to find it again.
Back to starting all over again. Yeah.
TV Paint though is beautiful for drawing, and I love it. I love it because it's all raster. So you can go as thin a brush as you want, light to dark, thick to thin. It's the closest to drawing on paper I found. Yeah.
That's neat. Wow.
Yeah. But it's raster, it's not vector. So whatever resolution you start with, you can only go down from it. You know?
Exactly.
So
well, Photoshop, I mean, I love Photoshop. I've been doing the bulk of my stuff now on my Wacom tablet here, and but for storyboarding, I went strictly with paper instead of so I scan it in, and then I format the whole thing and then dump it onto their server. So
that's
so
great.
back to my timeline. Okay, so I'm at both Humber and Seneca, and teaching at both of those at the same time, and what ended up happening with both schools was right around 2015. The colleges just seemed to have this attitude towards students that students are customers. They're not students. It's not a teacher-student relationship. It's a customer, and you're providing a product. And if they don't like the product that you're creating, they have every right to complain about it and ask for their money back. And so it just got to us. There was a whole series of events that took place of the empowerment of the student and feeling that they are entitled to everything. Especially at Humber, it was really bad at Humber because we had a lot of students who came in one year and they wouldn't do anything throughout the entire semester. You'd have your classes, they would show up. You'd have assignments, but nothing would get handed in. And then at the end of the semester, you'd have your final due date. Everything is due. Anything that you were late with before or didn't hand in, you have to hand it in for this day because I got to have my grades in the next Monday. So they would come in the final class and they'd be going, I'm really sorry, Brian. I didn't do my work, but give me a second chance, okay? Like, I'll do anything. That was their standard line. I'll do anything to get a passing grade. And I'd be going, well, where are your assignments? I can't get them done because I don't have enough time. Today's the last class. And I'd be going, well, where were you the entire semester? Yeah, but I can't afford to fail. That was their other standard line. And I'd be going, man, you didn't do anything. I can't give you a grade for nothing. And what ended up happening was I would say, if you don't have it in by 5 o'clock tonight on the Friday, I can't do anything for you. Your grade's going to be a 0. And so then the emails would start flying to both me, and I would say, nope, no deal. You have to have it in by 5. And then all of a sudden, the emails would skip over me and go to the associate dean. And the associate dean would then turn around and email me and say, you got to give him a chance. And I'd be going, it's the end of the semester. Like, what do I do? Do I give them the weekend? Do I give them a week? And they'd often say, well, give them, 5 days. But my grades have to be in on Monday, 2 days from now. Well, give them an extension. Put in a no grade for this, and then you can, supplement it. So then you give them the time, and 99% of the time they'd fart around and do absolutely nothing. Because they had like 5 assignments that they had to have done in 5 days. That you would normally take 4 months to do. So they would come back and say, I couldn't get it done. There wasn't enough time. Like, can you give me another extension? I'll do anything. Please don't fail me. You'd be going, no, you can't. And then the emails would fly to the associate dean and she'd say, give them a month. And I'd be going, what? Like, that means that any student in the program who did their stuff on time, that means absolutely nothing.
And I think I'm of the opinion, and by the way, I'm saying this with the realizing I could be totally wrong. Okay, so the listeners, viewers, take this with a grain of salt. But I was always of the opinion that the Sheridan pace, the hardness of it, the toughness of it, meant something.
Mm-hmm.
If I could make it there, I could make it anywhere, to use an old cliche. Okay,
Yes.
and I was not by any means one of the most talented students. I fought to just stay in the program, but I would work late at night at home. I would bring my work to my job at 2-for-1 Video, so I'd be working on layout assignments while I'm ringing people in.
Right.
Converted my computer into a pencil test machine at home thanks to the ATI All-in-Wonder card. I still remember it. And you know, and I fought very hard to get the C's and B minuses I got. Okay, like it was a struggle, but there was something prideful in that. You know, it never occurred to me to waste time and energy in student meetings, secret meetings where people would sit and drink coffee for hours just bitching about how hard the course was, or they couldn't get everything done. What I did do is I went up to Sean Jeffrey at one point, and I told him, after he inspired me to do this, by the way, he gave us a big lecture about specializing. And I went up to him at one point, early second year, and I said, I'm probably not going to do any work in this class. I really want to focus on character design and animation.
Right.
And he told me, he said, I would encourage you not to do that, but I do respect that you're coming up and you're telling me right away, but please reconsider, you know. And turned out my first job in the industry was layout. So, you know, but yeah, it just, to waste time, all that energy complaining and just, I don't know, I was too busy to get wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
know?
I agree. Yeah, Sean was in the second year that I started when I was teaching at Sheridan. He was in my second year.
Yeah.
A really nice guy. Really like Sean.
Yeah.
And I understand he's doing very, very well now as a director. I would say the same thing to the students as well. Like I'd preface the year with saying, look, not everybody's going to be strong in everything. You know, you're going to have a specialized area that you're going to gravitate to. And I understand that. You still have to pull your grades and everything else because you can't, you know, fail out of a class.
Mm-hmm.
But communicate with your instructor, you know, work out a deal, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Of just understanding that I'm not going to pump out gold in your class because I'm focusing on the other class.
Yeah.
Because that's where I want to go. But as you said, your first job was in layout. You know, that's the way things go. And Sheridan was built that way to be an all-around good school that taught you everything.
Yeah.
So that even if you were a C student in one area, you'd still be competent enough to understand what was going on in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Then Seneca was more of we weeded out all the bad stuff that was going on at Sheridan, and things were chugging along really, really nicely at Seneca. And then they decided to expand it into a 4-year program as well, which again I balked at, and I left them in 2015. Humber continued on until 2018. And as I said, you know, you get the students who would complain bitterly and not do their assignments and then beg you at the end of the year. Lots of students were really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the problem that took place at Humber was that things began to degenerate from above. Like the management would often say, you're giving them too much work. They've got too many assignments. You've got to pare it down. And I usually tried to work to a 2-week schedule where you'd have an assignment every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that it was unmanageable. You know, you might have to produce 1 or 2 drawings, and that's it in 2 weeks. So that doesn't seem like a lot to me.
No, not after working in the industry. It doesn't. As a student, you're like, oh my God, you know, it just, because you're getting that from a bunch of different places.
Right.
But yeah, I fully agree with you. When you get into the industry, you realize what you had 2 weeks to do, you've got an afternoon to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then what then, right?
Yeah.
So
So they began to pick away from above, saying,
Mhm.
take stuff out, take stuff out, take stuff out. And pretty soon it got to the point where we were barely doing anything. Like for the semester, there might have been 2 assignments, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, seriously. And so that began to erode from above, because then I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I giving them? Like they're not getting enough information. We're doing it enough times
Mhm.
to actually become repetitious at it
Mhm.
and improve themselves. So that started happening. And then the other thing that happened was they took away the portfolio aspect of getting into the program. And so now anybody could get into the program. It's first come, first serve, basically,
Mm.
which really made things bad. There were instances where there were students that were there for daycare, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were not supposed to be there. It's
Yeah.
because they liked animation,
Yeah.
and so their parents basically put them in this program, and they had no initiative themselves, and they had no ability at all.
Yeah.
So you'd be trying to teach them stuff, and like there was one student I had who just could not get it.
Mhm.
They simply couldn't get it. I would spell out the stuff that they would have to do for the assignment, and I'd say, "Bring it back to me and show it to me." They'd show it to me, and I go, "Like Jim, hey, you're just not getting it. You got to do this,"
Yeah.
and then he'd go away and come back 5 minutes later and go, "What did you want me to do?" It was literally like that.
Yeah.
And
I had a student like that too, and it's you feel bad because they shouldn't be there to begin with. Now, from the opposite side, if you look at it from a different perspective, what I learned being part of the faculty was just students equal cash, right? Get them in, get them out. By the way, get them out faster because that's more profitable too.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but it hurts the integrity of the course. And then you end up right where all these other private colleges are. Just whoever can sign the check gets in.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. That's great for your bottom line, but you're not your reputation for producing graduates who are capable goes way down, way down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what then? Then the
Yeah.
course doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. When I was teaching at Eastern College, my private college, excuse me, but I was trying to get them in the mindset of make the course like the equivalent of like a Navy SEAL feels pride because they made it through,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Go that route and have it so it's hard to get in because of the portfolio submission. And then when they're in, they really grow, and then they move on to great careers. And all of a sudden, your course becomes a destination course for aspiring talent. But that takes time, and time doesn't equal profit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's what the colleges are there for now. Is it's simply a matter of you crank the students through.
yeah, it's
And
unfortunate.
that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And at the end of that year, I said, well, there was the strike that took place.
Hmm.
And after the strike, I didn't go back.
Yeah.
And that was the end of my teaching career.
It's
So
so hard. And a lot of these students, like you said, they're there because they love animation and they have their
yes,
sketchbook and they're always drawing anime, whatever character they love, right?
yeah,
And they talk about the 9 old men and they know the lingo and the history. But when you try to implement some of that apprenticeship strategy to learning the skill, everything falls apart, either
yeah,
because the college is implementing a no scolding rule or whatever, or the student gets sort of They're like, well, this is too hard. It shouldn't be this hard. I don't want to do that. You're like, no, but you said you like the history of how the 9 old men got so good. This is how they did it. They were hard on each other and real critical eyed, and no, it shouldn't be like that.
Well, it's a total service to all the students who went through any program where you namby-pamby them and you coddle them.
Yeah.
And you tell them that everything that they draw or do is good. Because as soon as they turn around and try and get a job, all of a sudden they're being turned down because their portfolio isn't good enough. Or they get into a studio and all of a sudden they've got to do 40, 50 times the amount of work that they were expected to do in college. And they're crying, saying, I can't do this. Why didn't they teach me about this? Or why didn't someone, I've heard that. Where students come back and say, why didn't you tell me it was going to be like that in the studio? I did.
I know.
And we were trying to train you for it. But things just sort of went south. And I blame it on the number 13 because I taught 13 years at Sheridan, 13 years at Seneca, and 13 years at Humber.
Wow.
So 13 was not my lucky number for any of the schools. So one of the good things that took place at Humber was, I speak about some of the not so good students. There were really good students. Mm-hmm. There were some students that were just absolutely amazing, gold. Yeah. And again, you get opposite ends of the spectrum, and you get that cluster in the middle who sort of muddle their way through, and 50% of them will not get a job in animation. The other 50 will learn their lesson and get into it and do well. Yeah. But there were some really gold students that were at that program, and I set up a thing where I told the students at the very beginning of the year, again, similar to what I talked about before, where, this is the expectation of what the school expects you to do. This is what the studios are going to expect you to do way up here. You tell me where you want to go, and I'll give you feedback on that level. And I did have students who said, I want to be up here. Not a lot of them, but there were some that said, I want to be I want to be ready, because they were driven to get into a studio. And they did. After they graduated, man, their portfolios were amazing, and they got jobs, and they're still working in the industry now. Yeah. I'm subscribed to LinkedIn, and I have quite a few former students who are also in LinkedIn and connected. And so I'll get notifications, this is my 9th year anniversary at such and such a studio,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I did one summer was I set up just on my own. I rented, I actually paid for the classroom space because they didn't run summer programs. Mm-hmm. So I rented a lab and said to the students, look, if you want to work with me, I'm going to work on a personal project. Mm-hmm. You want to work with me? Come on. And I'll push you at a professional level. Mm-hmm. But we're going to produce this little short film, and anybody who wants to help me. And it helped me as well, because again, it was in Maya. So all I was interested in was storyboarding, character design, and layout and animation. Mm-hmm. But the TD stuff, there was no way I was going to do it. I wasn't going to be able to model the characters or texture them or light them or anything like that. So I got about 5 students who jumped on board with that. And, I said, I can't pay you anything. It's for me, for having fun, and I'm going to help you. I'll teach you, whatever I can. You're going to help me and teach me, and we're going to collaborate and produce this short film. And sure enough, we went through 4 months. We plowed through it, and I paid them by buying them coffee. Yeah. And their parking. And so we plowed through, and we got this film done, and it was amazing. It was really amazing. And I said, you can use this for your portfolio when you go out to get a job. And 2 or 3 of them did. One is an animator, one is a modeler, and the other 2 are technical directors.
What was the name of the film?
It was for the project that I was working on. I can't name it. Okay. Because
so it's not out there. It's not published.
It's not out there. No.
Oh, that's a shame. I wanted to cut it in.
I wish I could. I really wish I could. Yeah. But again, it's one of those deals where I had made an arrangement with someone else, and they were going to fund it, and the funding never came through. So
I understand.
It's sitting in my computer hard drive right now.
Oh, that's a shame.
But it was a cool project. It was a really cool project that we worked on.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. But that was sort of the highlight of the whole teaching thing. And when I look back on the overall teaching, I'm happy I did it for two reasons. One was the interaction with the students to help them, realize their dreams of whatever it was that they wanted to do. In some small part, I know I wasn't the only instructor. There were lots of other instructors that probably had more influence on them in some way or another, but at least I may have been a part of it. That was the one side. And then the second one is my pension.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm now collecting a pension because of it. So, which again, in animation, unless you're forward thinking and you can actually do that yourself, because you're never going to get it from a studio. You'll never have a retirement fund. You have to set one up yourself. So that's the other good thing that teaching did for me, is it gave me a pension. So
yeah. That's great, because that's a rarity in animation for sure. Yeah.
And I think, looking back on my overall career, I've been lucky in the various jobs that I've selected or been offered. The fact that I've gotten to teach as well, that teaching has spun off into the books and the website and into freelance jobs and things like that. And then I made some really good financial decisions early on after I got married that have pretty much secured us. Well, they have secured us, for the rest of our lives, so that I don't need to do anything, from this point on. So, to anybody who's out there who's young and just getting into the industry, you need to see a financial advisor and actually sit down and discuss it, because I know what it's like to be 20. You don't think, what's going to happen when I'm 60 or 65. It's just too far away. Yeah. And you only think about what's right in front of you on your plate at that time. Yeah. And so you really need to sit down with someone and plot out a future for yourself financially. Otherwise, you'll reach 60 and you'll go, holy crap, I got to keep drawing until I drop dead. Yeah. And that's
it's so funny you bring that up, because in September I turned 45, and I realized I don't enjoy animating as much as I used to. There is a tedious to it that I don't get off on it like I used to. What I get off on now is the storytelling. Okay, so doing boards, design is fun, but directing is what really, does it for me. And I am now trying to transition out of animation work into more producing, directing, and whatnot. Right. And because it just, I don't want to have to draw my butt off when I'm in my 60s. I actually have like issues drawing now because my hands shake so much and whatnot. Right. So I don't even want to think about what that's going to look like when I'm 60. Right. So, so you're right. There's, if you're smart when you're young, which is a paradox in itself, you can set yourself up really good. But most people, you're dealing with ego, you're dealing with short-sighted thought analysis, and it's hard. It's hard.
If I mean, at this point in our conversation, if I can pass on any wisdom from the 40 years now that I've been working in animation, and hopefully I'll still have some more beyond this. But youth is one of those things that you look back on and you say, wow, I was so reckless and so carefree and didn't plan stuff. I guess there are a couple of main elements that you really sort of have to be mindful of. Number one is obviously your health. Yeah. And I mean, that's not just, your physical health, but your mental health as well. Yeah. I remember when I was younger, I ran into a lot of back problems, from just sitting all the time and hunched over at a desk. And I would have to go to a chiropractor and get my back work done and stuff like that. And then you get, as you get older, it's sad to say, but things start breaking down. I mean, I've been pretty good like I'm 60 now, and I have, one of the students texted me after the last interview and said, "Holy crap, you look exactly the same as you did when you."
I know.
And
I thought that when you first popped out on the screen, I'm like, wow, good genes or good docs, you know?
it's part of both. Part of both. I do have genes on my mother's side that are very long lived. My grandmother on my mother's side lived to be 105, and a lot of my aunts and uncles on that side of the family are in really good condition. Like they've done very well. So yeah, the genes have partially to do with it. I admit it, I don't want to brag, but I haven't aged that much since then. Like I don't have gray. I mean, for some reason I'm 60 and I don't have gray. I'm not sure quite why. Actually, I do.
Rub it in.
Here's why.
Oh yeah.
A daily dose of Diet Coke.
Yeah.
There's actually on the ingredients it lists formaldehyde. There's formaldehyde in there, so that must have something to do with it. But actually, no, it's not.
What? Jeez. All of a sudden, I had the urge to go see my kids and make sure they're okay.
No, there's no formaldehyde in it. But I do exercise. I am actually doing a lot of exercising.
Yeah.
I mean, now with COVID, I have a gym in the basement that I try to get down to once a day, once every 2 days. The gym that I go to down the street is an amazing gym. And during the high time, I was going once a day, for 2 hours and working out. So I'm in good shape from that point of view. But the mental health thing, I mean, you go through all the different cycles. I mean, that's the thing with animation is it's so up and down, and you're at the whims of the studio. If the studio decides to beat you, or in my case, the teaching, if the management decides to beat you up, with Sheridan, the whole breakup of Sheridan, literally that took me 20 years to get over.
Yeah.
Okay. So that ended in 2001. I'm just over it now.
Yeah.
I've been able to let it go and say, I mean, maybe it's part of it is the pension, that I'm getting a pension. So I don't have to worry about going back to work. Maybe. But that's part of it, I think. But yeah, there are things that you need to sort of let go of. And I know it's difficult. I can flash back in my own career and say, if only they had have treated me better, or if only this had gone this way, or if something had happened differently, But it's, I don't know, it's letting go of any anger that you have over personnel, things.
That's such a great point. Letting go of anger. There were things just like you. Like I went through a big loss when I had my company and it crashed. I lost everything. And there were perceptions of me out there that were just not true. And it took, like you said, it took until just like a year or two ago for me to be like, okay, I'm just letting that go. There were people who had, from my point of view, screwed me over. I made amends with them. Don't have the energy to continue any kind of feud. It's just poison inside you, and it wears you down mentally and physically. It takes a toll, because you don't behave in a positive way. You get too wrapped up with the sludge in your head.
Yeah.
You don't want to get out of bed or off the couch or whatever. Like everything becomes a pity party. Yeah. And I had just had enough. And but it took so long to get to that point.
Yeah. Even some preconceived notions of, when you're working on a new project, like this new project that I'm working on, I had to get over a couple of hurdles about, why are they doing this, or why is it written this way? And come on, various things like that. But you just accept what it is. It's a job, they're paying me money to produce a product, back to the cog in the machine. Yeah. If I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. And so you either put away, whatever anger or thoughts of, it could be so much better if it was like this. You just go, this is what it is. And you accept it and you embrace it. And it, again, I'm a week and a half into this project now, and this past Monday, so 1 week into it, I flushed my brain and said, I went to Walt Disney's term, plausible impossible.
Yeah.
That even though it seems absolutely ridiculous what they're asking you to board, you just go, it's plausible impossible. It can happen. It's plausible, it's impossible, but you can make it happen. And you just realize that's the audience that you're dealing with. It's little kids. They'll accept it, so just wash away any, anger over stupid writing or whatever, and just go with it. And as soon as I did that, it changed. My paradigm changed, and now I'm really enjoying it. I'm having fun with it, and so it's and that goes for any job. I mean, anything that you're working on, you can look at the negative side of it, you can look at the positive side of it, you can look at the monetary side of it, just the pure money. But you can also look at the negative side of money and say, well, they're not paying me enough to do this. But I've always, any job that I've ever done, I've always approached it from a learning point of view. What am I going to learn from this? How am I going to further develop myself? And every drawing I do, I say, I'm going to try and make this drawing the best drawing that I've ever done. Best drawing I've ever done. And you keep pushing. And they're not always going to be the best drawing that you've ever done. But if you go in with that mindset of saying, I'm going to push myself, and it's exhausting. It can be exhausting, my arm is sore from so much drawing. But again, then that goes back to the physical aspect of it, where you got to get up every hour and just do some stretching exercises and move around.
Well, hey, what a great segue into your Van Damme image, right? First of all, what the hell? The funniest part of it is that you ignore it during the video while you're talking about animating. You don't even talk about it. You're just, so anyways, and you're flipping away, but you're doing a full Van Damme.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to give away the secret on it. I'll just leave it as an enigma.
I'm pretty sure I figured it out, but I'm not going to feed into
we'll talk about it after. Don't give anything away, but we'll leave it as an enigma for now.
It took me a few minutes though. When I scroll up, I'm like, what the? Because here just before I saw that image, I had a hard time getting up off the couch because I have lower back issues. And I'm hobbling down to my bedroom to where my wife is, and I get on the tablet, and I'm just like, oh.
Well, the reason I did that, there was a twofold reason why I did that video. One, the initial reason was my brother-in-law and his wife were over visiting, and we were watching TV, and a Van Damme movie came on, and so we're watching, and all of a sudden he's in the splits, and he's laughing, and I'm going, I can do that, because in actual fact, when I was younger, I could actually do the splits.
Right.
Okay? Like, I used to do Taekwondo and all that stuff, and I used to be a goalie, and so I could do full out complete splits. So he says, I can't believe that you can do that. And I said, I can do that. And he goes, no way. So I said, yeah, just give me a bit. So I ran downstairs and I set up my video camera and I set it all up and I did it, videotaped it. And then I brought it up back to him after I had done my thing and showed it to him. And he goes, no way. No way. I'm like, yeah. So then I decided I'm going to show it to my students, okay, as an object lesson, okay, not to say, oh, Brian can do the splits. So I show them the video and they're going, what? That's incredible. I can't believe that you did that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Do it now. Do it right now.
Yeah.
I would say to them, well, I can't because I have to stretch. I mean, you can't just go, boom, you're in a full split. You got to stretch and, work your way up to it. It might take me 2 hours to stretch my muscles out to get to the point where I can do it. And I said, the object lesson here is that animation is like performance art. Okay. You do something and you put all this effort, months and months and months of production work into something to show this final project. Ta-da! And people go, wow, that's so amazing. That's incredible. And it's back to what we talked about before. Well, what are you going to do now? What's the next thing? What have you done just recently? What can you show me right now? Right? It's always got to be prove it. Yeah. You're never good enough for what you did in the past. Like I can look back through my career and again list off Inspector Gadget, working on Rock and Rule, and
Man.
you know, Walks and Droids, and blah blah blah. The Oscar with Ryan, etc. Resume stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But people want to know, what have you just done recently that proves to me that you've got it. And so that was the object lesson that I was trying to do.
That's my family. They still do that to me. My grandmother just told me to go apply at Canadian Tire. So, you know, it doesn't matter the last thing. It's what, you know, if you don't have something awesome in the last 48 hours, your career's over.
Yeah, yeah. It's always the last drawing you ever did. That's how good you are, which is sad to a certain extent. It's also a driving factor, but it's also very, very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my nightmares is going into a restaurant with the brown paper table coverings, right? And the crayons.
Yeah.
Because people are, oh, Brian, draw something. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not how I work.
Yeah. I get that from nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
You know, they'll visit and they'll say, what can you draw for us? Draw something, Brian. Look, Brian. You know, and so you got to pull something out. But I mean, you know, whenever I visit with cousins or nieces and nephews, usually it's up at the cottage, the family cottage, and I always bring my computer with me, and so I set it up in the kitchen. So I'm always working on something, some animation. Yeah. At some point. Somewhere.
So when you walk away from teaching, you said you just kind of disappeared for a while. The teaching.
The teaching thing really took a lot out of me at the very end. It was it was such a disappointing exit from it.
Yeah.
That I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sit at home and in my underwear eating Cheerios.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good time. But what was that thing? I think back to Lord of the Rings, where Sam is sinking in the water and Frodo reaches down through the water and grabs his hand and pulls him up again. You must have had a moment like that.
Well, what happened was immediately after I finished, like I thought, okay, well, I got to do something. So this project of which I cannot speak in detail, it had been going on for a while, and there had been little upticks in possibilities of money coming through from various sources. And so I figured, well, okay, I'm not teaching anymore. I've got nothing to do. I might as well plug away at this thing. So I started diving into it and just banging away at the various elements. It's made up of little audio clips, and each clip has a little storyline to it. So the imagery, I'm not giving away anything by saying this, but the idea of the flow of the whole thing is it's if you're watching television and you're actually changing channels. And so you would change the channel, all of a sudden a commercial would come up, and it would be a commercial for something. And that would last 45 seconds. And then you flip the channel, and now all of a sudden you're onto a soap opera. And that would last for like 2 minutes long. And then you flip the channel, another commercial, flip the channel, another television show, flip the channel, a movie, flip the channel. So it was all these little tiny clips that were between 45 seconds long and 5 minutes long. And so there were 23 of them all together. And so it gave me this whole cornucopia of possibilities of what I could be working on at any given point in time. And so when I was first initially shown or asked to work on the project, I immediately jumped on it because I thought, A, I love the person who's doing the voices. B, I thought this is an incredible opportunity. C, they said you can do anything you want.
Oh, right there. That's how they get you.
Yeah. Which it's funny because Pam Rose just recently posted on the 80s Sheridan thing. She wanted to know, what's the highlight? What film do you look at, or feature film or television show or something else that you've done since you graduated? What's the highlight? Yeah. And it's interesting because there weren't a lot of comments on there, but the ones that were there, they all cited the autonomy, the fact that they can do whatever they want, the freedom to do whatever they want. They would cite the odd film, but it was interesting because in some of the comments they would say, yeah, I really love what I did on that feature film, but they never used anything that I did or, something like that. Yeah. But the ones that had complete creative control were the ones that said that was the best. Yeah. And so, in my mind, it was a win-win situation to work on this project because I had complete creative control over the entire thing. It was only me until they came up with funding and said the idea was once we come up with the funding for it,
Mm-hmm.
we got to go. Like we got to start plowing it out, and that's when I would have to start hiring people to assist me in various things. But up until that point, it was just me, and so I could do anything, and I would do everything.
Yeah.
So from character design, conceptual design, character design, storyboard, layout, into animation, into colorization, editing, it was all me. And, again, with the setup that I've got here with the desktop and the Wacom, I have a studio with Adobe Premiere and Adobe Photoshop. That's all you really need.
Yeah.
They will be your studio and a scanner, of course.
Yeah.
So I leapt on the idea of it, and I just started picking the clips. So I would do a 45-second commercial, and then I'd do a 2-minute film, and then I'd do another. So I've got 7 of them that I've completely finished between the time that I left Humber in 2018 till now, which is when they sort of said, we don't have any money. We don't foresee any money coming through. And I just sort of went, okay, I'm going to back off right now.
Well, I think YouTube changed the game for so many independent producers, right? At first, it took all the money away from people because everything was free on YouTube, and then the monetization just sort of made it worse because everybody was on YouTube. Everything is free on YouTube was a bad thing for a while. Then it was a really good thing, and and it keeps perpetuating and changing as well. But it's really hard because back in, I don't know, 2005, you could probably, as an independent animator, you could have quite a go at releasing your own CD-ROM stuff, DVDs and whatnot. I think it's really hard now because, I mean, there is a YouTube video for everything. And a lot of them are taught by 12-year-olds who just got a laptop for Christmas. Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you the amount of times I've been in a studio and I have to composite something in After Effects. Don't know how to do what I need to do because I've never done it before. But there's a 12-minute tutorial by a 12-year-old, and I have to put my headphones on and listen to. So like, and I'm like, oh my God. I know you can do it. It's in your thumbnail. Just get to it.
That's true. It's very similar to the small press story that I gave you. It was just so much competition out there that it just, if you're the small fish in the big pond, it's really difficult unless you're doing something bizarre where you're trying to give away $1 million and have someone spend it in a minute, or something stupid like that. I mean, for people like us who have a trade that we've trained for all of our lives and we're passionate about, you can have a home studio, but the tricky part is getting yourself motivated to actually complete a project and get something done and that is really, really hard to do by yourself, without someone pushing you or the money, being the motivating factor to it. Just being by yourself and saying, I'm doing it for the love of it, is difficult. And you can even push on it portfolio. I'm doing it for my portfolio. Like I've got, the Sherlock Holmes film that I got the grant for back in 1983. That's still sitting on my back plate of, something that I could still do. Part of it is I'm just not totally motivated to do it because, again, where is it going to go? Like, how is it going to be monetized in some way? I doubt it. I mean,
I know I mean, every night I go to bed and I think up half a dozen ideas because I have one of those brain won't let you sleep at night type brains, right?
Yeah.
And I think, oh yeah, okay, tomorrow's a new day. Oh yeah, I'm going to go at it 100%. And then I wake up and motivation is not quite what it was at 1 a.m., and it's, I don't know what it is. There is a dilution of motivation that happens, and it just gets worse as the day goes on, because you start thinking, well, yeah, if I did this, but I got to do all the work.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at this and this and this. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I would have said, I'm friggin' awesome at everything. Give it to me. And it would have looked like crap. But the ego has been beaten down to more of a reality, flatline. And I'm able to see, okay, I can do a passable job at this. I cannot do this.
Right.
I'm not going to do it myself. It's not going to look like how I want it to look.
Yeah. I think part of it has to do with scheduling, like scheduling your time out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like exercising. You've got to have a specific time of the day that you're going to go down and you're going to do the exercising for that time period. Then you're going to have a shower and then you're going to do something else. So if you're working on your own personal stuff that you say, okay, this is like a 9-to-5 job. I'm going to wake up at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Get showered, get dressed, have breakfast, and then 9:30, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do this until 12 o'clock noon, where I have lunch, and then from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock, I'm going to do, layout, storyboard, animate, whatever, and you actually do it through that time period without any distraction, and then you take your break and you have your supper and you spend your evening doing whatever, and you go to bed, and then you wake up the next morning and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Without that regimentation, the time just flits away on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just dissipates, and especially now with COVID, and for my career, I mean, COVID took a whole nother chunk, and I'm sure it's affected everybody in the same way, where now the previous job that I had, so after I finished teaching, I was off for a little bit working on the project. I finished off my basement.
Nice.
All the work. I'm fairly handy, building stuff. So I did all the drywalling, electrical, and everything down the basement. So after that was finished, I then got a call from Snap to work on that project, which had the Bitmoji characters. But again, that was out of the blue. They just called me through a recruiting agency. So that lasted 6 months, and it was agreed upon ahead of time. No, it was 9 months. Sorry. It was agreed upon ahead of time. This is the contract. At the end of this, we're finished. And so did the storyboarding throughout that whole thing and supervised, worked with John Flagg on that. And at the end of the 9 months, they said, we're done. And that was the end of it. So that's just before COVID kicked in. That was in September of 19. So then I took a bit of a break and then started getting my pension. But during that time period, I was still looking for work. And so that's when I went on to Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, all the different places. You put in your resume and say, this is what I'm interested in. And
yeah,
so
that'll fill up your inbox with rejection like nothing else.
Oh, yeah. So every day I get 5 or 6, 10 emails saying,
I got to tell you, Brian, it gave me a real complex. Like, I legitimately was having conversations with my wife, like, maybe I don't know anything about animation. Maybe I shouldn't even be in this.
Yeah. Well, the biggest mistake is putting in artist.
Yeah.
Because a makeup artist.
Yeah.
Just today I got a Subway sandwich artist.
Nice. Now, have you gotten the animator wanted? And when you read the ad, what they're talking about is like a gymnastics teacher or something,
or a motivator.
Yeah,
motivator like, from old folks home.
Yeah. Jeez.
Lots of those.
So moving forward into the future. I mean, right now you're doing storyboards. What can be that can be such a great gateway to directing. Do you have aspirations to get into directing, or like what?
I've always wanted to be a director. Like right from get-go, from college right through, I've always wanted to direct something. And the opportunity has never, ever presented itself. Now, getting back to the application thing, between the beginning of COVID and now, and going online, you put in your application, like, over that year, I've got probably 60 applications that I threw out to job listings that, for all intents and purposes, you look at their qualifications of things that they say you need to have. We're looking for this. And I'd be looking at that stuff and I'd be going, holy crap, I'm overqualified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's no way that they cannot accept my application. And you hear nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Or there've only been 3 instances where I've been asked for an interview. And one of them was for layout. Okay. Which I actually have a trophy over here that the people from Nelvana gave me. Chris Mins made it for me out of Fimo. It's a beautiful trophy. I should get it and show it to you.
Yeah,
it really,
go ahead. Yeah.
Beautiful. Just reach up here and get it.
Okay.
I've got it sitting very proudly on my bookshelf. Now, I got to hold it way back here. So you can see it.
Wow, look at that.
So it's actually an old lamp.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the base of the lamp. Here's the stem.
Yeah.
And at the top, I'll just pull it in here. You can see it's
look at that.
It's a fist with a lightning bolt pencil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very
and
cool.
on the bottom, there's a little bit of, I don't know if you can read it or not, but it says
Layout.
It says Brian Lemay, the layout god. And it has Ultra Cross crossed out and Care Bears written in, which the crew, when we were working on Care Bears, the last season of it, I was the layout supervisor, and the entire crew got together. We had a huge party celebration at the end after I had been fired, and they all thanked me for being such a nice guy. But anyways,
yeah,
that I still have that as a beautiful reminder of that.
Yeah.
Which is really
too bad your inbox didn't match up with that reality, because
so now back to this job interview.
Yeah.
So it's a job for layout, and they actually asked me to come into the studio and do a test. So I interviewed and did the test, and when I sent the test in, I got an email back saying, well, it's okay, but your perspective needs a lot of work.
Oh, jeez.
And I thought to myself, you know what? I bet you the person who is assessing it is one of my former students who really hates me.
Right. Maybe.
Because I know I nailed the perspective on that thing.
Yeah.
But that's just the nature of things. You know, you have these interviews and people want this and that, and you think you're qualified, but you're not. And again, I'm only speaking from my point of view here. I do think ageism has a certain amount of to do with it.
Thank you. I have an email that I've kept. I saved it, archived it, where it says we're looking for somebody younger with a fresher take.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or someone younger that we can abuse.
Yeah,
and not pay as much, because that's part of my problem. Is that I've got this huge, and they actually said this at this interview for the layout. They said your resume is huge, like you've got a ton of stuff, and then they brought up the fact that, well, what have you done lately? And so I listed off all the stuff that I'd done recently. And they said, well, we haven't really seen that. And I said, yeah, it hasn't actually been produced, but I've been doing this, and we can see that you were supervisor of the layout department, but what have you supervised recently? We need someone who's good with people. We know you've taught and dealt with people before in a supervisor, but what have you done recently? So it's that weird thing where, you got too much experience and you're too old.
Yeah.
And actually the other thing that I forgot to bring up was the fact that at Humber, and this was, again, lumped in with all the other stuff that I had mentioned. This was another thing that really killed it for me, was that they had said, I was teaching part-time then. They had said, well, we have a full-time position available, but the only way you can get a full-time position is if you have an animation degree or a degree period, right, of any type. So at that time, my highest education was Sheridan College diploma, because what actually ended up happening was I left in second year, so I didn't get my diploma when I left. And when I went back to teach to Sheridan in 88, I think it was around 93, the dean came to me and said, you really should have your diploma. So why don't you take the summer school course and get your diploma? So I took the summer school course and got my diploma for third year. Yeah. But now they're saying you have to have a degree. So I actually shopped around and found a school, a university that would do it by correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
And this was Bournemouth University in England. They had a 3D animation program.
Very cool.
And so I applied to the program, and the guy emailed me back, the guy who was the coordinator of the program, and goes, wow, like your resume is huge here. Like, why are you doing this? Like, shouldn't you be teaching in our course? And I explained to them, well, I want to get a full-time gig, but I need a degree, so therefore I have to do this. And so they said, well, listen, with the length of your resume and all the stuff that you've done, we're just going to grandfather you into the program. And it's a 3-year or a 4-year degree. We're going to put you in the final semester of the 4th year. So you just have to do these 3 courses, 3 assignments, and produce the final film.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, that's great. Thank you so much. They said, well, we've never done this before because you're not actually physically here. You're in Canada. We're in England. We're going to make this a pilot project, so you don't have to pay us anything.
Even better.
Which is really cool of them.
Yeah.
So over the summer of that year, I did the degree, finished the film, about a 3-minute film in Maya, and submitted it. And they gave me the degree, which I then turned around and handed it to the associate dean and said, well, oh, go ahead. You want to say something?
Now, is that film available?
No.
Huh,
because that's no, I'm sorry.
You gotta give me something, man.
I'm sorry. So what ended up happening was I handed the degree over to them.
Yeah.
And they came back to me about a month later, and they said, you know what? You're at the top of the pay scale now. Like, you can't go any higher. There are steps in the collective agreement. You know about this because you've taught at colleges. You can go up to step 21, I believe, is what you can go up to. Most people start off around 3 or 4, and every year or 2 you go up a step. So this put me, because I had 13 years at Sheridan and an additional 13 at Humber, gave me 26 years. I was now at the top level, or I was at level 20, and you can go to 22. So the degree put me over the top at 22. So now I'm in the top upper echelon of pay scale.
Well,
so
that makes you a target.
Yes, exactly. So what the dean then did was they looked at this and they said, we could actually get 2 younger instructors for the price we'd be paying for you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So I didn't get the full-time position, which then added into the reason why I left.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's the problem with the degree is that I'm overeducated.
Right.
And I've got too much on my resume, and I'm too old. And so therefore it's very difficult for me to get a job. And I'm very lucky that I got this one through a connection that I know. Came to me and said, I'd really like you to be working on this. So,
yeah.
So, the direction thing, I would love to direct at some point. I have applied for directing positions, but they've just never really come through. And again, it's back to that. You've got all this experience, but it's a Maya program, and we need someone who's directed Maya. Yeah. Well, how do you get in? And again, I go look back on my career. Practically every job that I've ever had has been first time I've ever done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to start somewhere. There's always got to be a first time you've ever done this job.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you start off as an apprentice or an assistant and, weasel your way up, not weasel your way up, but, promote yourself up to the next position. But yeah, there's always a first for everything as well. So that directing position has just never really become available to me.
It will.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's necessarily something I'd wanted, because I heard from a former student who texted me after the last interview, and they're directing on a kid's show. And they said it's like herding chickens.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So I'd love to do it. Then I'm often wondering, should I take it if I got it? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, all I'm looking at right now is what's in my plate in front of me.
Yeah.
This kid show that I'm going to work on, and I've got 2 episodes to do before it gets greenlit, and then hopefully once it's greenlit, we'll have another year's worth of storyboarding to do, and then we'll see what happens from there. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I feel like that's a great spot to end it on.
Because it's the end for now.
Yeah, for now, because you're writing whole new chapters right now.
Yeah.
So we'll get you back another time, and find out more, and maybe I can talk you into.
65. You can get me when I'm 65.
Yeah.
Let's see if I'm gray by then.
Oh man, I'm so envious of that. I think I turned gray the day I left Sheridan, and the gray just went poop. I'm there. Anyway, so yeah, this episode will be out in about 3 weeks.
Okay.
Thank you for helping me promote the last one and for being on. Period.
So delightful and great. I've really enjoyed it, and just the opportunity to reconnect with students. When they, text me back or email me back to say, "Oh yeah, I saw the thing. That's really cool." And you mentioned my name or something like that. it gives me a chance to reconnect with them and find out what they're doing. So selfishly, this has been a real treat for me because I've always thought very highly of you. So this is thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
This is very great. Very very great going down memory lane and hearing more about the man behind the myth kind of thing from my perspective, right? As a former instructor or student of yours. So yeah, it's very cool. And so yeah, we will end it there.
It only matters you create when you're drawn to it, drawn to it. Get creative and flex imagination. Write a song, you might hear it on a station. Do a painting of some pigs in a pig pen, or be a stand-up comedian. It doesn't matter how you create, cause you're drawn to it, drawn to it. It only matters you create.